Greetings, it is Dr. Jimmy again. Hello. And I'm continuing once more my history of Halloween Horror Nights in Orlando. This being my fourth video in my new series on the history of the event Universal Orlando Halloween Horror Nights 24, which was held at Universal Studios, Florida in the year 2014. But first, as usual, I shall show off my t-shirt of the day. And this one is an American Horror Story shirt I got last year when I first heard that American Horror Story was coming as a haunted house. As you can see, it's got a bit of a reference to the Illuminati. I don't know what that has to do with AHS, but we do also see this little silhouette of, well, the Rubber Man. And if you go up here, here's one of the Minotaur from Coven. So it has references to both Murder House and Coven in this strange esoteric symbol. But that's not it. It's called the American Horror Story Tour t-shirt. I don't know if you can see well now if I get here. And the back of the shirt, it has just like a rock and roll tour where it lists all the stops on the tour except the dates there, the tour dates. They are actually the dates that those different series debuted on FX, along with the locations for each of the 5 series. For example, the Murder House in California, the Carnival, the Elsa's Cabinet of Curiosities in Jupiter, Florida, that sort of thing. There's Bob again. Hello, Bob, you funny cat. That's my evil cat. She's a nice kitty. She's come to help us with this video. What fun! So, enough of that. Let's resume. Description of the event. And if you recall in part 3, I got about halfway through a really big house. The Walking Dead end of the line. This was a haunted house which was located in Soundstage 25, and the very first house ever in that large stage. And as I had mentioned before, it was an Uber house, perhaps the first of the big mega houses. A tradition they seem to have been continuing in the next couple of years. In 2015 and 2016, they've had some big plus-size houses the past couple of years as well, although I'm not entirely convinced those were bigger than the one they did in 2014, which encompassed just about all of Soundstage 25 and even had some structures on either end. So there was a little bit before you went into the soundstage itself and a little bit when you got out. So it overflowed the soundstage. That's pretty enormous. And encompassed the entire 4th season of the popular AMC television program The Walking Dead, from the prison to Terminus. And we left off about halfway through the house. I was talking about scenes that we had after going through prison and the big spot department store. They found the scenes that were from the bit, because the various members of the survivors got split up and independently tried to work their way to Terminus. But one splinter group consisted of 2 people, Daryl Dixon and Beth Green. And if you recall, they went to a country club, the ruins of an old country club, where Beth was going to have a little drink of peach schnapps, but Daryl broke the bottle and said, no, you're not going to drink that shit. And then they find a moonshiner's shack, and she gets to have some white lightning, wee-ha! Well, of course, Beth and Daryl were in those scenes, which I described in the previous video, and they were quite fun. That's an ear. That's a bob ear, you see, and lurking around there. That sort of looks like a shark fin, doesn't it? It's Jaws, da-da-dum, but it's actually Bob. Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun, meow-meow-meow. It's Paws, haha. Paws, get it? Anyway, she's sitting on my notes, so hopefully I can do it all by memory, because I can't read through a cat butt, which is blocking what I wrote before. I need X-ray vision. Oh, you silly cat. Silly cat. Well, getting back to it. So I talked about those scenes. So after those amusing little scenes, things got really hairy as we start making our way towards Terminus and going through the rather zombie-ravaged countryside. And one of the first things you see after that is a petrol station. And there's some burnt, crispy zombies somewhere around there. But the petrol station, there's like another sort of gag, I think, on I think it was either the gas tank itself or possibly on some. There was sort of a 666 there as a bit of a joke, as I recall, or else it was something like, I think it was that. It might not have been. It might have been something like 4311, that sort of spells out hell if it's upside down. I don't know, something along those lines. Anyway, whatever it was some sort of little inside joke with the numbers. Then you start going through some wooded areas, and there's one zombie in particular who's kind of in front of one of those green viney structures. It's actually like camo material, and he's got an arrow stuck in him and he can't get away. He's kind of caught in the shrubbery or something, but then he lurches forward. Fools you, thought he couldn't get past that because he's been impaled. And then you find yourself in one of the most harrowing scenes in any haunted house ever, and it's one that they repeated for the Walking Dead house last year, but it didn't quite have the impact of the first time, which seemed bigger. And that was this huge forest scene, and you're out in this woods. Yeah, you're not out of the woods yet, kids. You're in this big forest. That's a Lemony Snicket reference if you've been watching the series on Netflix. I highly recommend it. Nothing to do with Horror Nights, but I highly recommend it. Please watch that. It's fun. But getting back to Neil Patrick Harris is awesome. No, anyway, getting back to Horror Nights. Go through the forest, and there is bazillion freaking zombies in there. And they're coming at you from all sides, and there's strobe lighting, and you get disoriented. They use mirrors to make it look like this horde is endless, and there's some mannequins in there as well as scare actors, but how the frick do you know which is which as they lurch toward your face, and you go through this horrifying gauntlet of endless zombies, and you're quite relieved when you get through. But then there's one of those messages that Maggie left for Glenn, saying, "Gone to Terminus," Glenn, gone to Terminus, Maggie. So, oh, look, there's a message from Maggie telling Glenn, whom she hopes is still alive, that he will... for now. Oh, that's naughty. But just wait till season 7, then BAM! Lucille, but that's another story. So, goes through the woods, and you see the sign there, and you see also another zombie kind of on the ground eating a rat. Quite effective. But when you go then you have to go through another very harrowing scene. Remember Maggie and the group she was with, I think it was Maggie and Sasha, and I think they met Abraham and Rosita for the first time in Eugene. I'm not certain, I might be wrong. It's been a while since I watched the episodes, but the Splinter group is trying to get to Terminus and hope the other people will meet up with them there. And they do, but we all know what happens. But going into a tunnel, they have to go through a tunnel, and it's partially caved in, and it's filled with walkers. And so you have the tunnel scene. There's big piles of rubble where some of the roof has collapsed. Remember, they shot at the ceiling, and the walkers, some of them are buried in the rubble, but they're not quite as buried as you think they are. And there's some holes, and you don't know which holes that have an arm come out at you and which holes don't. And so it's a very harrowing, dark, confined area where the walkers will be coming after you. It's quite horrific. It's very well done. Then you get to Terminus at last, and you're welcomed. And they're the people that are chopping up vegetables, and they've got that whole little courtyard area outside when they first welcome you in. But you don't realize that these people aren't as friendly as you think they are. And of course, there's someone with a gun, bang, 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 bang. Maybe not as friendly as you think. as you pass the little planters of vegetables and things. But what's really clever about this bit, if you took the time to look around you, there were some other, there were lots of fun Easter eggs in this house, and this scene had some of the very best. Shout outs to the great icons of Horror Now, they weren't present in the flesh that year at Horror but their names were evoked in the house because there were big signboards like from different businesses that had been put up as part of barricades or whatever. And so you saw these boards, these signs from different shops and things, and they had, mortuary services, Albert Kane, for example, or film development, Paolo Ravinsky. And there was one, I forget what the business was, but there was Elsa Strick's name, Jack Schmidt. And so you realize the names of the icons, their real names, the caretaker, director, storyteller, and the I think there was one for Browning as well, for the usher as well as Jack. So you had all the great icon names up there to remind you of the icons. And you begin to suspect something's amiss in Terminus when people start getting a little more rowdy and wave machetes at you and with guns and shoot guns and try to stab you. Think, gee, these aren't as friendly as you think. And that becomes more clear when you go into the big room where they have the big paint on the wall that says, "We first, always," and the other one that says, "Never again," with all the little mementos of all the people who've died that the Terminus people had lost, all the little candles and little pictures, and you realize these people have a grudge against anybody. They blame everyone else for what happened to their loved ones, and so they're going to take care of themselves first, and you're on the menu, although that's not quite implied yet, because we didn't really learn exactly what they're going to do with the people that come to Terminus until season 5, but you knew it wasn't good. And sure enough, they're hostile now and even more angry and slash at you with knives and shoot at you. And as you get the hell out of that room, you find yourself in another gauntlet, because now you're in a room with all kinds of chain and chicken wire and stuff. And there's a bunch of fucking zombies in there. And so you're in through another gauntlet of zombies before you leave the house. So that was Walking Dead End of the Line. Really big house and pretty spectacular. It was pretty good for a Walking Dead house, one of the best they've ever... I think it was, to my mind, the best Walking Dead house until last year. Last year's Walking Dead house was even better. The first two were all right. People got, geez, Walking Dead every damn year. Well, the first one was good, the second one was better, the third one was excellent, and the fifth one was amazing. The fourth one, though, kind of sucked, but we'll get to that when we get to Halloween Horror Nights 25. But, oh well. Because I think the people at Art and Design thought the third house was going to be the last one for Walking Dead. They didn't realize, oops, we have to do it again next year? Really? But we'll get to that when we get there. So, that's 4 houses done. We're halfway through the houses. Oh, she got mess on my notes because she's a little bit messy nowadays because she's not able to lick herself the way she used to because she's got some problems with her mouth. And so I have to continuously bathe her and clean her off. And sometimes that she leaves, mess. It's like from the cat food. So I've got some schmutz on my notes, but let me see where I left off. Okay, next house would be the 5th house. And that one it will be the first, because I'm going around counterclockwise, right? I'm done with the sound stages. So the next one would be Disaster Overflow Q area. And the house in that location that year was the first of the original houses for Halloween Horror Nights 25. Yes. And this was called Giggles and Gore Incorporated. Yes. Giggles and Gore Incorporated. And it had a really nifty, high-concept backstory, so let's start with that. So, the idea behind this house is about evil clowns. Now, we all love evil clowns, and they've been part of Horror Nights from the very beginning. They had evil clowns roaming around as some of the ambient street characters, even before they started calling them scare zones and scare actors, before they had set scare zones. There still were creatures in the park, and some of them were clowns. And then, of course, the first evil clown that showed up in a haunted house was in the Boneyard. Was that Horror Nights 3 or 4? I think it might have been 3. I don't remember. But anyway, there was the boneyard that had an evil clown in it. And then, of course, there were midway of the bazaar was a scare zone for years that had a whole carnivalesque scene. There were always evil clowns there. But it culminated with the greatest of the evil clowns at Horror Nights, the great icon of Jack in the year 2000. But even after that, other sinister clowns have appeared now and then. And rarely did we have a clown-themed house that wasn't about Jack. So this was one like that. Isn't that interesting to have one that's not specifically related to Jack? And yet, perhaps it was. But it wasn't. The idea here is that these evil clowns, these creatures that haunt our nightmares, are not like regular clowns. It isn't people going to clown college and learning how to be trained to become clowns. No. They're not. Clowns are not trained. Evil clowns are not trained. No. Well, they're not born. People aren't just born evil clowns either. So if they're not born and they're not trained, how does an evil clown come into existence? They're made. They're made? Yes. They are manufactured in a clown factory, made from the body parts of victims. And in this Giggles and Gore Incorporated, they take the human victims and they turn them into evil clowns through torture and twisting and dismemberment and putting the bits and pieces back together and making a clown out of what were pieces of human beings. And it's rather horrific. And these evil clowns then go out to commit mayhem throughout the universe. Oh, what delightful. But some of them are so horrible that they cannot even be allowed to leave the factory, and they're kept locked up in a special section. Apparently these clowns can't even speak. They're just so bloody awful. I forget what they had. They had a word for it, but I don't remember off the top of my head. They even had a warning sign, beware of the what was it? I forget what they were called. Sort of deplorable clowns or whatever. I don't know what they were called. Whatever they were the worst ever. And they were kept locked up. But when you go in, you start out when going through different scenes. And so the facade is this lovely brick building. That's the factory. It may have been some other factory in the past, but now it's been taken over by the clowns to make more of them. And as you go in, you see scenes of people being tortured like something out of Clockwork Orange with their eyes forced open while cartoons are playing incessantly over and over again. Little happy Woody Woodpecker, that sort of thing. And they're forced to laugh. Their mouths being stretched out to force a smile. But that's the mild part. As you continue, more atrocities are occurring. There's like great big grinders that grind flesh and pull bodies apart, and bits and pieces falling off, and clowns keep popping up everywhere. It's one scene after another of clownish madness. And of course, this is a perfect house to have those guest-activated triggers. And there's one with a big red button that says, "Do not push the button." And of course, you push the button and water comes shooting out at you and at other people near you. So that's always a lot of fun for a laugh. But I mentioned that Jack was referenced, of course. Jack was referenced a couple of times. There are some bits and pieces from old sets of carnival posters that you see a very familiar drawing of a certain hairstyle and makeup. And then, more importantly, in one scene there's this great big blender that looks damn familiar. Where did we see that giant blender before? Some carnival of carnage sometime in the past? Yeah. It came back, of course, the next year, the year after that, but in a lovely way. But that we saw it there in the house, and there were lots of wonderful clowns. There were gigantic, enormous, freakish clowns, and there were pretty sexy girl clowns, sort of Harley Quinnish, and other wild, crazy clowns, all laughing and hysterically and attacking you, sometimes wearing funny outfits like firemen's hats or whatever. blowing whistles and doing clown things, as well as murderous things when they attack you with all sorts of weapons, from chainsaws to axes to whatnot. Then, of course, you come to the place where those horrible clowns that are so bad they're locked up, and you go through these very dark corridors, and those monstrous things come lurching out from the distance. Sometimes use mirror effects to fool you. You think they're coming towards you, they're coming from behind you, and they all make an awful bloody noise like "arr, arr, arr," something like that. Not like a clown, not happy. And you go through those awful things. Once you get past those guys, you get to the climactic scene, which is a great, big, happy place. It's brightly lit, and there's at least one sexy girl clown, and then one great, big, fat, beer gut clown, and they're there to attack you in the end. But there was something you really needed to see, and I believe at the end there was a clown with a chainsaw to chase you out of the queue area. But one thing you needed to see, and I didn't see it for, God knows, the longest time, until near the end of the event, when someone told me I should turn around in that scene and look the way I had come in. In that last scene, once you go in the room, if you turn around and look behind you, the door you just came in, there was something above the door, and it was the face of Jack in all his glory. An enormous face posted on the wall, a photo of Jack, huge, taking up the whole wall and ceiling. His face and his eyes and his smile glaring at you. So there was a big reference to Jack at the end. Okay, so maybe this is Jack's origin? No, but perhaps Jack was behind the whole factory in a way. Maybe he was the proprietor. Again, Jack's real connection to the factory is unknown. But it was hysterically fun, and it was one of the few houses that I could go in when I first get to the park when it was still daylight and enjoy it, because somehow it worked in the daylight. It wasn't very dark, and therefore you could go through it in the daylight, and of course, being in the queue area, a lot of light bled in, and it let you see more rather than see less. So actually, it wasn't bad at all to go through before it got dark, and so I do that often. That would be the first house I hit when I got to Horror Nights that year. And it was really tons of fun, and I liked it very, very much. And there's something else I need to talk about, Giggles and Gore, and I don't know if this is true, but it's a rumor that was passed on to me, because people will pass stuff on to me. And again, I don't know if this came from somebody in art and design who passed it to someone who passed it to me, because sometimes the people who pass me stuff get good information, sometimes they don't. But what they had heard was that at least an original concept, Giggles and Gore Incorporated was not meant to just be a standalone house, but the start of a whole new horror franchise for Halloween Horror Nights. Like, for example, Shady Brook Asylum, Psychoscary franchise, or the Body Collectors, or others that have come back over the years. And that, in fact, they had specifically conceived of it as a trilogy. And so Giggles and Gore Incorporated is the first house in the trilogy, and that there would be a second and third house already planned conceptually that would come sometime in the future to continue the storyline. Now, I hope that's true, because it'd be very interesting to see where this goes from the factory. What next? The distribution system to the world, or what? I have no idea how this would continue, but I'm very curious and intrigued. But again, I don't know if that is an accurate rumor or not, but it would be interesting. I do know that in 2015 and 2016 they did not continue Giggles and Gore. But if it is true, since it's been a couple of years now and it's 2017, that might be a very good possibility for one of the original houses at Halloween Horror Nights 27. Again, I don't really know this for a fact, but if what I heard is true, and they plan to do 2 more of these clown houses, then maybe we'll see Giggles and Gore Part 2 this year. I hope so, because I would like to see what happens next. All right, so next one. The 6th house, continuing around the park, would be in Building 79, also often referred to as the Parade Building. And this was another original house. This one was called Roanoke, Cannibal Colony. And because the code word for the house was work, but it was actually meant to be read backwards. They'd done that once before, I think, with the code word house evac, which was cave spelled backwards. Wasn't that clever? But work was actually crow spelled backwards. And some people, again, this might have had something to do with the rumor about the crow icon. That did not happen. But, and I wonder if that had been part of the previous plan. Of course, they may not have planned for crow that year at all. But if that was the plan, then maybe it was Crow who was supposed to be haunting the colony, and rather than the Wendigo. I don't know. I don't know at all. But again, from what I understood, though, is that it was a bit iffy whether they were going to do this house at all, because they had been talking about doing this house, Roanoke Cannibal Colony, or a house based on the television program From Dusk Till Dawn. And the idea was going to do one house or the other one. They hadn't decided which. Then they decided to scrap the original house that never was, which might have been called Nightmares, and the code name was Ritual, and then put From Dusk Till Dawn in Soundstage 22, and so Roanoke happened. But Roanoke was a pretty awesome house. It was a very, very good house, one of the better original houses that year. It was enormous, and it was taking place in the old Roanoke colony. Of course, fans of American Horror Story hear Roanoke and immediately think, oh yeah, but this was sort of presaging, because this was, of course, 2 years before American Horror Story came to Horror Nights at last. They were still trying to get it, even in 2014, but they still couldn't swing the rights. And I don't think they had any idea that American Horror Story will be visiting Roanoke themselves. But oddly enough, they did a house based on Roanoke, and the idea was that, and if you aren't familiar with it, in American history, Roanoke Island, which is now off the coast of South Carolina, but back in the day was in Virginia, because the Virginia colony actually spread across not just what is the state of Virginia and West Virginia, but the parts of the Carolinas, and going up even into what is today Ohio and Kentucky. It was a big place. It was all called Virginia, and then later on it got partitioned and made into smaller colonies, and then eventually states. But that was the location of the first attempted colony by the British. Long before the Pilgrims landed, back in the 17th century, there were people landing there at Roanoke and the Roanoke colony, and they were thriving for a while, and then they mysteriously vanished, and they were never heard from again. And when the ships came from England, there was nobody there. The village was empty. There was nobody there. What happened to them? No one knows. To this day, that mystery has never been solved. There's some theories that they were killed by Indians, some theories that they ran off with the Indians, intermarried, because there were some tribes that had interesting traits, like maybe some blonde hair and blue eyes occasionally. So maybe they intermarried with the Indians, and that's what happened. They just assimilated, went native. We don't know. But there is one clue they left us, a word, Croatoan, C-R-O-T-O-A-N, which was carved on the side of a tree. And fans of Supernatural get excited when they hear Croatoan, and of course American Horror Story, it was a word of power to ward off the bad spirits. But Croatoan is actually the name of one of the native tribes, and it could be that's the tribe they went off with, if that's what happened, or got killed by, if that happened. We don't know. Again, there's no answer. We do know, however, the very first European ever born in North America was born in Roanoke Colony, and she was given the name Virginia Dare. But then, of course, she was part of the group that vanished. There's a legend that later on, when other colonies were established, a hunter shot a deer, and the deer fell down and looked up. Before it died, it opened its mouth and spoke, "Virginia Dare," where the deer spoke the name of the baby from Roanoke. Ooh, scary story. I don't think that story is true. Deers don't really have the mouth that enables them to speak in an English tongue properly. They make deer noises, which are quite creepy if you ever hear them. I think you can find YouTube videos of deer noises. You don't think deers make any noise at all, but they do. And it's kind of noises. Screaming goat noises, yes. But I don't think they go around saying, "Virginia Dare." I did make a gag when did the RIP tour on that opening night. The girl was talking, and I said, as we were going into the house, I said, "Oh, we're going to take the Virginia Dare," because I thought she got it. She got it. She knew about, and she laughed and said, "I'm going to use that for my RIP tours. If you don't mind, I'm stealing that joke." So if you went on an RIP tour of Roanoke and the girl said something about take the Virginia Dare, I'm the one that gave her that joke. All right, not done with the house. I really haven't started it yet. That'll be in the next video, which is part 5.